Good morning and welcome to Morning Java. I'm Dale Lally here with Mike Kovac. I cover, of course, the Steelers here at DKPittsburghSports.com. Mike covers Pitt and helps me out on the Steelers. And, of course, as always, we're brought to you by our friends at Get Go Cafe and Market, where you can get some great deals on some great food that really is restaurant quality. It's right there with anybody. They've been open throughout the situation that we've been going through here and remain open, providing everything that you need right there to Get Go. Mike, I know on Tuesday you had an opportunity to sit in on a conference with that included Pitt Athletic Director Heather Lyke, and she had some interesting things to say about how sports is going to start back up at Pitt.
Yeah, no doubt. I thought, there were a lot of people that spoke during this roundtable discussion, and I thought some of her comments were the most revealing. She went into, the process that Pitt's going through and getting these student athletes ready to get them back in terms of being able to do workouts, just lift weights with teammates. Right now the freshmen who came in are in a 2-week quarantine. How they are going to keep 18-year-olds that some of them may be away from home for the first time.
Yeah.
How they're going to do that, I have no idea. Good luck. The
Give
freedom,
them some video games. They'll stay in their room all day long.
video games and a Netflix account, and just hope for the best at that point. But there was definitely some cool comments there, and she let you be in on the process a little bit and what they're hoping to do, and they're going to try to, after this 2 weeks, start having groups of 10 live together, and then up to 50 live together. And from there, if the report from Sports Illustrated is true, I think it's July 13th, Pitt will be able to start having some workouts with coaches. The footballs will be able to be used around, I think, July 24th. It's all in, and they have to get 25 days in before, and then they can have their August camp. And if they're able to do all this, then they're in line to kick off September 5th against Miami of Ohio at Heinz Field, and the season started. Will there be fans? A lot of people say at a Pitt game, there's usually not many anyway. But
they won't have any problem social distancing for a game against Ohio.
Probably not. Although I will say this, I think, just sort of sensing comments from people and talking to some people, there is an excitement this year that I haven't seen in recent years, and a lot of it has to do with that defense. All the guys that came back, Patrick Jones, Jalen Twyman, Paris Ford, 3 guys that maybe could have been drafted, probably would have been drafted had they decided to go. They're all back. That defense finished 15th in the country last year. They have a chance to be really, really good, and it's going to be interesting to see how they develop over the course of the season.
So, Mike, you mentioned that Pitt's going to start their workouts and get all those things in, and we talked about it last week. How this would, when we got the news that the Steelers, the NFL was telling its teams that they had to stay at their facilities or a facility. They didn't specify there, but they did say they had to be at one facility. And we now know that the Steelers are going to do their training camp at Heinz Field. A lot of people wondering why that would be the case, because, quite frankly, if you looked at the NFL rules and how everything broke down on this, the only place the Steelers could do their training camp at one of their facilities was to do it at Heinz Field, where they had more locker room space.
I'm kind of curious to see how they handle this. My first thought was, how tore up is that field going to get? You've been there, you know how bad it is. What do you think? How are they going to handle this, Dale?
The field has not been the issue that it used to be really since late 2010s. They changed the grass surface there. It does get torn up, you're right, but it's much easier to replace now. They're able to go in basically. They essentially replace that thing 3 or 4 times a year. Of course, once being after the Whitfield playoff games there, they'll come in and essentially just scalp the whole thing and resod it and start over again. So, that's going to be an added expense for the Steelers, but, they still they would have gone to St. Vincent College and torn those fields up, and then they fixed them as well. So there's always some field maintenance going on. That's just part of playing on natural grass. The field surfaces over at the UPMC Rooney Sports Complex get torn up and replaced as well. So, the big thing for the Steelers is that they're going to be able to, because I'm surprised more NFL teams haven't done this thus far. No team at their practice facility has locker room space for 180 players, which is essentially what you're going to need, because they're saying that you have to put a player in every other locker in your locker room. The Steelers usually bring in some temporary lockers when they come back from Latrobe. They'll have some temporary lockers set up in the middle of the locker room to put some additional players in. And even those are filled up because you got 90 players in there. I think they have roughly probably about 75 lockers in their locker room facility at the practice complex. So you would need to add an extra 90 or more lockers in that locker room. It's just not feasible.
No.
That was the big reason. It's much easier to socially distance them down at the stadium. I'm going to be interested to see where they set them up to do weightlifting, set them up to do team meetings and that kind of things. Those are all going to be done still virtually. There are a lot of, it seems to me, reading, what the NCAA rules are and what the NFL is expecting their guys to do, is the NFL is being much more stringent about this. Maybe because, they want to protect their assets, which are the players.
And I'm also guessing Heinz Field makes sense in that if fans are going to be allowed to attend, you can accommodate some.
Yeah, I don't think they are. I've been told that the media, if we're there, we'll probably be sitting in the stands. They're not going to allow us into the press box necessarily because it's an enclosed area. We may get some access to the radio booths. So I may be able to do, my Steelers Nation radio shows from the press box, but that'll be it. I don't know if they're going to set up a working area for us. I don't know. Again, we don't know at this point if we're even going to be allowed in to watch. I hope we are, because, one of the great things about training camp is you get to see all these young guys. We haven't seen any of them. And so, you want to be there to be able to judge, is Chase Claypool as fast? Does he play as fast as he ran at the combine? I don't know. I haven't seen it.
Yeah, it's definitely, we're entering a unique, unknown territory here. And I guess we're going to find out in about 5-6 weeks what it's like.
Yeah. So, Mike, one of your first stories for the site last week was another recruit signing with Pitt. And I think Pat Narduzzi is acquiring himself a pretty good class here for the 2021 season.
Seems pretty solid overall. He's sort of operated, him and his staff have operated with a similar MO since, Narduzzi arrived. They get a lot of those 3-star guys or sometimes even the 2-star guys that have that quote unquote high ceiling, the guys that are, haven't even come close to playing their best football yet, but they might fit what he's looking for, particularly like in the defensive backfield, the big guys, the height, the guys that are going to be able to fill out. It was only the second WPIAL kid, Stephen Hall from Central Valley, where Pitt got Jordan Whitehead, where Robert Foster came from. And, he went down to Alabama and has been with the Bills. So it's a school that's produced a couple of good players. And in talking with their coach, Mark Lyons, he said this Hall kid, he's a guy who best football's way in front of him. Gave him a really high ceiling, but I also said in terms of what a high school player, he's kind of a complete safety. Great tackler, good on the ball, can cover a ton of field. A lot of the stuff that I'm sure really attracted Pitt to him. The 16 players, there's only one 4-star guy according to Rivals, and that's Nakai Johnson from Steel Valley. And oddly enough, he was the first guy to commit from the class. So their first guy was a big splash. And I think it got everyone excited. Like, here's this big-time WPIAL kid who's committing to Pitt early. And then you didn't have another WPIAL kid commit for another year. And I think that speaks a lot about
That's less about
what
Pitt than it is
Pitt's
the
looking
Whitfield.
for.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
if you look at it, and you look at the WPIL rankings, there just aren't a lot of Division One talents there in football. It's really gone downhill. I mean, I know people, still take pride here in the high school football, but it's certainly not what it used to be.
Yeah. And then there's still excellent players that come from here.
Right.
Obviously, Paris Ford, another still kid who played
And
at Steel Valley.
Aaron Donald came
Yeah,
from here. He's maybe the best football player in the world right now.
exactly. I think it'd be hard to argue that he's not the best football player in the world, but you certainly get quality from here. There's not the quantity that there used to be really. There aren't a ton of skill kids really that come from here anymore. You get good defensive players, you get good linemen. There just doesn't seem to be the speed and the desirable qualities at the skill positions right now that these college recruiters are looking for. And if you look at Pitt, I'm sure they would love to just draw a circle around, a certain hour radius from Pittsburgh and be able to recruit it, but they can't anymore. They're hitting the Hampton Roads area of Virginia hard. I believe they have 3 guys from there right now. They're hitting Georgia hard. They're branching out. They're going south, which makes sense because they're playing schools from the south. So that's where they're visible down there. They're getting guys. They've always recruited Florida pretty well. I mean, that goes way back. They're still hitting Florida. So, clearly their emphasis is on the South right now. Heck, they got a kid from Austin, Texas, a quarterback. So, I mean, the days of sort of sticking close to home for Pitt recruiting, they're gone.
Yeah, and it's a shame. Maybe it'll come back. I have my doubts about that. As our population, continues to grow
Mm-hmm.
older and older. There's fewer kids. I mean, we see a lot of the high schools around here are really just struggling to hold on to football. But they're holding on to it, for days, for looking back at their glory days. But as you mentioned, we still produce some good linemen, some good defensive players, but those skill position players aren't what they used to be.
Definitely not. And like you just said, I sort of piggyback off that. There's so many small schools in the Whitfield. I think it cries for mergers. You put some of these schools together and make them a little bigger schools. You're creating more competition for spots on the field. When you create more competition, it obviously elevates play. If we had some fewer schools but bigger schools, I don't know that it would solve, the problem, but it could create a few more Division I type caliber players every year.